I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors Budget Work Session. We'll start with public comment. Is there anyone here in the audience for public comment this evening? Seeing none, I will ask if there is anyone online. Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online for public comment, sir? Thank you very much. All right, briefly, I just want to remind everyone we have members of our Citizen Budget Advisory Committee here again this evening. Thank you very much for coming out. And you'll see you have a small token of our appreciation there. There's a King George notebook and pen for you to use. So thanks again for your service to us. And we thank our Director of Economic Development and Tourism for providing those to us. We'll move on with the revenue discussion. Mr. Cusenberry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First thing we want to talk about tonight is revenue. Just give you some preliminary information. What we're seeing is a continuing of the growth in single-family construction. Talking to Heather in Community Development, it's anticipated that that growth will continue through next fiscal year. So we will be showing some additional revenue in the real estate tax category. And that's going to carry over into the personal property tax also, with new vehicles, new people coming to the county that will result in additional revenue that we're anticipating. And the same thing with the sales tax revenue and the meals tax revenue. So we do anticipate some growth in those categories. We have seen the preliminary estimate from the compensation board regarding the constitutional officers, and there will be an increase, not a major increase, but there will be increases in those items. And just for the committee's information, the jurisdictions receive compensation from the comp board for the sheriff's office, the treasurer, the commissioner of the revenue, and the clerk of the court. And that doesn't cover their entire budget. It might be in the 40% to 50% range of their budgets, but it does help in funding those departments. And today I met with the landfill to catch up on a number of items. And one thing we discussed at length was their projected solid waste tonnage for the remainder of this fiscal year and moving through next fiscal year. And they anticipate for this fiscal year around 1.35 million tons for this year. No, I'm sorry, that's for next year. For FY22, they're anticipating 1.35 million tons of trash. Now for the first 1.248 million tons of that, so for the majority of that, the county receives $5 a ton as the host fee. For all the tonnage over 1.248 million tons, the county receives $5.50 per ton. So the revenue anticipated from the landfill host fee for FY22 is going to be around $6.8 million. Now, in addition to that, several years ago when the county approved the vertical expansion, part of that was the county was going to receive $3 million, which would be over a 6-year period, so $500,000 a year for 6 years. And we have 2 years remaining of that $500,000. So in FY22 and FY23, the county will receive an additional $500,000 of revenue from the landfill for the host fee. Now the bad news with the landfill, it's projected that as of July 1, 2021, there will be 19 years of life remaining in the landfill. So that's a very critical and important number for the board and the citizens to be aware of, because as you can see, we're receiving around $7.5 million, anywhere between $7 and $7.5 million per year in landfill revenue, which all goes toward capital projects and debt payments. But in 19 years, that revenue will no longer be here. In addition to that, the county residents currently receive free trash disposal. And at the end of that 19 years, county residents will be paying for trash disposal. Just just something to keep in mind as the board thinks about what they need to do looking forward. Next, if I could get everybody to look at this handout. The title is called County of King George Historic Revenue Data and Preliminary Budget. Did everybody have this? I'm going to go over it in a little bit of detail and show you how we structure that. At the top of those sheets, you see fund source. Well, and then you see the fund sources going down on the left-hand side. I'll go over that. But at the top of that, you see some years, FY17, FY18. Those lines, FY17 actual, 18 actual, that is the final numbers as far as the revenue that the county received in those categories. As you move toward the right on that sheet, you'll see FY21 adopted. Those were the revenue numbers that the Board of Supervisors adopted last year for fiscal year 21. Then no amendments are shown here, but almost every year there's some amendments. There may be additional revenue or some changes, and that's shown in the amended budget. And staff is working on updating those numbers. And then, of course, there's FY22 category. That's highlighted in yellow. At the next work session, we'll have numbers in that category for you to see. Now, coming down on the left-hand side of that sheet, there are several topics. Revenue from local sources. That's your real estate taxes and your personal property taxes. There's some delinquencies, all those things, machinery and tools tax, penalties, interest. That is shown as total general property taxes. And you can see a subtotal from that, and you can see that's a significant revenue source for the county. The largest portion of that obviously is real estate taxes. Coming on down to the next category is total of other local taxes. And that would be local sales taxes, consumer taxes, business license taxes, meals tax, items like that. Then as you move down to that sheet toward the next sheet, there are permits and regulatory licenses and fees. That's where the building inspection charges go. And most of that is related to building inspections and the fees associated with getting permits. Then there's a category for fines and forfeitures. Then revenue from use of money and property. That would be interest. There's revenue for county properties. For example, next to the Vehicle Maintenance Center on Route 301, the county owns some property there that we've been leasing to a car dealership for a number of years. And the county receives revenue for them being able to store some vehicles there. And as you come on down, you see charges for services. And that could be sheriff's fees and library fees. And the biggest category there is the ambulance fees. That's been running around $500,000 a year that the county recovers for ambulance services. And that's paid by the insurance companies to the county. And then you have a miscellaneous revenue category, and then recovered costs. And then toward the bottom of that, page 3, you see other transfers. That would be the rate stabilization fund that we talked about the last time. That's a major part of that. And also the transfer use of the general fund balance. If you use general funds to balance the budget, that would show up in that category. And then on page 4, you will see a listing that has the Commonwealth Attorney, Sheriff's Department, Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer. That's what I was talking about as the revenue that the county receives from the state through the compensation board. Moving down that sheet, you see Department of Social Services. All those charges are related to revenue that the county receives for various parts of the social services programs. On page 5, so that was revenue from the state. for social services and other uses like the COM board. Then on page 5, you can see revenue from the federal government. And again, the county receives funding for some social service programs and for some school programs and things like that. And the remaining sheets, I don't think there's any major revenue sources on the other sheets. There's some recreational activity revenue that the county receives for the recreational programs. And on page 8 at the bottom, that will show the landfill revenue that the county receives. You see the landfill host fees listed there. The next category is landfill fees beneficial use. When the county executed the agreement for the landfill, part of the agreement stated that the landfill operator would provide the county funding to fund 3 positions at the landfill of county staff, and that grows based on the consumer price index. Then waste energy facility, there's a facility there where they burn the landfill gas through turbines and sell the gas or the electricity back to the grid, to Dominion Power, and King George County receives 10% of the gross sale of that sale of gas revenue. And then there's the landfill fees for the expansion, and that's that $500,000 a year that the county will receive for 6 years, with 2 years of revenue remaining there. And on the bottom of page 9, that is the capital improvement fund. And that's the funds that the county applies each year toward county capital projects that will be approved by the Board of Supervisors. And then the school operating fund, the school has similar revenue sources. They receive revenue from the state, a large component of their revenue from the state. In fact, if you look on the bottom of, well, let's go to local services for local revenue first, because looking on page 10, you can see that toward the bottom of that page, the school division received, adopted in FY21, almost $18 million in local revenue for the school system. Then on page 11, the school system received about $28 million from the state for the school system. And then on page 12, you can see that the school system received about $1.6 million from the federal government. So if you look at the FY21 adopted column on page 12, you can see that the total school operating fund was almost $48 million. And if you come back to page which page is that? Yeah, you come back to the top of page 6, you can see that the county's budget was a little over 40, almost $47 million. So you can see that the school budget in FY21 was more than 50% of the total county budget. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Questions from members? Mr. Granger?
Sorry, I just want to go back to the landfill. I appreciate the heads up on, I thought we had a little bit longer than that. I know we've authorized the landfill to take in more waste, which obviously cuts back on how much time you have on it. Is this, and you're saying that the estimate this year was for 1.35 million tons of trash for this coming fiscal year?
FY22.
Okay. And so is the 19 years based on 1.35 from here on out, or is it there?
Well, when the board approved bringing in additional trash, that was, my understanding is that was only for 5 years.
Correct.
So that number is based on around 1.3 million tons per year.
On average across the next 19 years?
Correct. Average across the 19 years.
Tracking. Thank you.
Mr. Stonehill?
Nothing right now.
All right, Ms. Bender?
One question with the school's budget. You said it was over 50%, correct?
On FY21, correct.
FY21. Was there any from last year money that was returned to the county? Where would I find that if it was on the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
That actually doesn't come back in as revenue, but there was funding that was returned. I actually have the figures in an email somewhere. If you want me to look, I can update you on that later, or just shoot it to you. But they turn back in what any funds that are remaining at the end of the year revert back to the county, and then anything that they had encumbered at the end of the year, that those funds are given back to them.
Okay, so if you could just send that to me, that'd be great. Thank you.
So if I can add to that, I believe when we had the CARES Act joint work session with the school board, we had a month prior received a memo from Dr. Young indicating that the schools had returned about $500,000 from last year. But I obviously defer to Ms. Hahn for the exact number. Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Travis, earlier you spoke that we're realizing somewhere around $7 million annually from the landfill, and that the life expectancy is 19 years, which translates to about 25.9 cents that it's offsetting our tax rate. So the debt that we have established and future projects where we're going to encumber more debt, how does it look? I don't want to be at a point to where 18, 19 years down the road, we have a 25.9 cent tax rate increase to be able to address our debt service for the county. So I'd just like to put that on the radar, because I know last year we put aside our debt mitigation plan, which was appropriate for the time that we were facing. But I think with that plan and our ability to establish more cash flow as we pay down that interest, looking at that 25.9 cent, 26 cents increase down the road, it would be proactive to maybe look at putting that in, maybe not paying in as much as we did with our fiscal constraints. But I think we do need to enact a plan, because that's a big difference, and only 19 years left on it, and the longevity of the county and the future capital improvements, that's problematic. Thank you, sir.
Agreed.
So I don't have any questions. Mr. Chapman, did you have any questions, sir? Mrs. Huber? Mr. Say?
Yes.
Go right ahead, sir.
Unless it's just my first time doing this. So I see in a lot of cases like real estate and personal property that in 21 the adopted is less than 20 actual. What was the reason for assuming less when we were building memorial and those kinds of things, that we were anticipating less revenue coming in?
See, I couldn't hear.
So I'm looking at the 20 actual for like real estate, it was 19.26, but the 21 adopted was 19.2, or down the personal property, it was 7 million in 20, but only anticipated 5.6 in 21. So I'm just curious as to why 21 numbers were anticipated to be lower than 20 on those revenues.
That's a good question. The chair maybe would answer.
So I feel like our rationale for that during last year's budget cycle was we started out with a budget that was more ambitious, And then COVID came around, and I feel like we tapered some of those because the thinking was maybe that some folks would go into arrears and not be able to keep up with their personal property tax and their real estate tax payments. I think members can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I feel like that was why we did that.
We did have some concerns about being able to collect all the revenues, so there was some of that. I'm not sure why it was it is about 1.4 million. I don't recall the reason why it was such a drastic one, but like local sales tax, it's about $400,000 less, and that was anticipating we're just going to have, and it did. It's everything kind of slowed down, so we were trying to prepare for the worst and say, well, let's assume less money is going to come in so that we don't spend money we don't end up getting.
Okay. So if additional does come in, what does that money go towards? If we bring in
General fund. At the end of the year, it would go to the general fund. I mean, right now, any additional monies that would come in would not be allocated to any department at that time. During the year, if something were to come up and someone like let's say a new position was required because, community development's getting, really busy and they're like, wow, we really need another planner or something like that. Then they could come request and then we could allocate dollars and that's how you could spend some of those dollars if you see they're coming in. Or if at the end of the year, I mean, you just have the surplus and it goes into the general fund, which is not a bad thing necessarily. It's better than being in the red, which is not allowed.
Okay, that makes sense. So kind of the same question on the ambulance fees. I mean, is there a reason we anticipated that would go down significantly in 21? It was like it was 720,000 in 20. We anticipated.
Which page is that?
I'm sorry, page 3. Seems like a fairly significant reduction. But it looks like previous years it's been going up.
I don't have a good answer for that. That might be a question for maybe Chief Moody, and I'm sure he had some input onto that.
But Donna may be able to address that.
I'm sorry.
Donna may be able to address
Okay.
that.
I think with, first to go back to your question about the real estate taxes are billed twice a year. And so June is a big month for payments to come in. So when the revenue budget is built during these budget work sessions, it's before we've realized all of the revenue that is going to come in for the current fiscal year. So that's why, you budgeted April, May, and your revenue doesn't totally show up for the previous fiscal year until June, and then after the books are closed. So it's a delay there. So it's just estimate, and then again with COVID. And I think too with the ambulance revenue, we recently in this current year have switched our ambulance billing company. And prior to this, I don't know that I don't think that the company that we have was pursuing collections as it is today, the company that we've gone with. So we could see those numbers going up. I've been involved in some of the ambulance billing meetings with our new company, and things are starting to pick up with them. But there was, a lull between the two companies, so to speak. And also with COVID, people that don't have insurance that may, and those things may anticipating getting some of those written off because people just, they're out of work and can't pay that bill. Where the insurances don't pay the full amount. And so whatever the insurances don't pay, if it is a county resident, then those additional fees are waived, just kind of like an insurance company pays your health provider. What their maximum is that the insurance pays, your health provider writes those costs off. And so that happens with ambulance billing fees as well. And like I said, a big up part of it probably is COVID too, because if you can't pay, in these difficult times, I don't think we wanted to take the hard press and pursue getting those revenues back from people that are already struggling during COVID.
Okay, and one last question, then I'll be quiet. On the landfill, from 8.7 million in 20 down to 6.4, but I didn't think the trash we were bringing in went down. So that seems like a pretty sizable drop from 20 to 21 also.
There was a significant drop, yeah. Waste Management showed me the numbers today, and it was surprising how that far that did drop.
There was a reduction in
It
trash
was.
coming in. Thank you.
So just to add to that, Mr. Say, and citizens, much of the revenue from the landfill is actually trucked here from out of state. So while we may have seen people locally cleaning out their closets and their houses and reducing the clutter because they were staying home more and had more time on their hands, some of that comes from New York and New Jersey, and they had pretty severe shutdowns, and their restaurants were closed, so they're not generating that kind of trash. So that really affected the bottom line of the landfill for a great deal of the past year.
Also, just to, as it brought up before, last couple of years, we had authorized the landfill to take in more trash or more solid wastes than was originally permitted, which brings in more revenue for the county, which is nice on those years when you're getting it. But as Mr. Cusenberry told us, you know, it shortened the lifespan of the landfill as well. So it's dangerous. You know, sometimes you need to do it, but it's also dangerous because it has repercussions. And so it's not something you want to probably get used to. And so, you know, it's probably good for us to readjust and say that, hey, let's, you know, not do that again and you know, only pull that out when if there's a real need to. So at least that's my 2 cents.
All right, if that's all we have for revenue, did you want to move on, Mr. Cusenberry, to expenditure summary?
Yes, if everybody could pull out the larger sheets, 11 by 17s, I'll do a similar summary as I did for the revenue. On the top is the years, like you saw on the revenue side, FY actual, 18 actual, 19 actual, then the FY 21 adopted, FY 21 amended. Then there's another category you didn't see on the revenue side. That's the FY 22 department request. And that is as we receive the request from each department. Then there will be some adjustments by the county administrator. Then there will be the county administrator will present a preliminary budget, and we'll have a schedule later in tonight's work session showing that. Then the Board of Supervisors may make adjustments to what the county administrator recommends, and then there will be an approved FY 22 budget that will be advertised, and the public hearing will be held on that advertised budget. On the left side of those spreadsheets, you'll see a fund number, Fund 100, and then there are other numbers under that, like Fund 11011 is the Board of Supervisors. Also later tonight, you'll see some detailed presentations from Human Resources and the Treasurer, and you'll see those sheets have line items. So that one line there, Board of Supervisors, there'll be another sheet, and you'll see that has the multiple line items in it. And each of those line items has an accompanying detail sheet that we can provide those also. But so the total budget could be 300 or 400 pages because of all the detail sheets that shows all the information on each of those line item budget requests. All that information is available, and we review all that information in preparing the recommended budget. So the categories for the budgets, of course, general administration, you can see the departments that fall under general administration. Then judicial administration, that would be the circuit courts and all the courts and programs associated with that. Then public safety is the sheriff and fire and rescue and 911. Animal control is also in there. Then public works, which is a landfill, engineering, and litter control and general properties. Going over to the next sheet, you have the health department as an oversight agency. Then the Department of Social Services. And one thing I want to highlight in the social services budget is line item 53900, Children's Services Act. That's proposed to increase $1 million this year. So, the director will be coming to a future work session. He'll be providing more detailed information for that. Now, as you saw on the revenue side, the county does receive revenue from the state and the federal government, but that does not cover all of these costs. And coming down, you have Parks and Recreation, then Community Development, which includes the Planning Department. Then you have some non-departmental costs, and under that is like the Smoot Library and the Revenue Stabilization Fund and the debt mitigation. And as Mr. Bush alluded to, if you look move over to FY20 actual and FY21 adopted, there was no funding provided for either the rate stabilization fund or the debt mitigation fund. In fact, the board used quite a bit of money from the rate stabilization fund to balance last year's budget. And then, of course, you see down also, there's the school operating fund, and you can see how much of the school operating fund is local sources. Now, one thing the state does have is what they call RLE. That's the required local effort. And each jurisdiction is required by law to provide a certain amount of funding to the school division. King George County far exceeds that required local effort in their local funding. Next sheet is that's mostly just the Smoot Library, and also some transfers from the Recreation Fund, showing some expenses there. There was some revenue on the revenue side, and of course you got the expense side of that also. And then on the following sheets, that will be the schools' budgets. They have their operating fund 250. You can see the breakdown there, and obviously most of their funding goes to instruction. They have a separate fund for the transportation, and they also have a separate fund for the school cafeteria. And then down below that, you see Fund 302. That is the capital fund. That's where all the capital projects are funded from. And that under Fund 302, you see transfer to debt service of almost $7 million. And that is the county's debt service payments this year to pay the loans that the county took out, and also includes the county's portion on the debt for the regional jail. And at the bottom of that page is the tourism fund. And then the last sheet is just a summary of those expenditure categories. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And at upcoming work sessions, we will be providing our recommendations regarding how much each of these departments should be funded.
Questions from members? Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. So on page 2, not sure if it's just a duplicate, but I see under 93999 for transfer recreation activities. There's no numbers under there, but there's a number of things. One of them is the debt reduction mitigation fund, and then you see it again at the very bottom, debt reduction mitigation, and so one of them was in FY19 and one of them is FY20. Are those two different line items for a reason, or just okay? Figured they'd probably be the same. You can go on. I felt like I had something else. I slipped my mind though. If you don't mind circling back to me at the end.
We'll look into that, Mr. Granger.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. The other thing was, I see the school. I remembered the schools. Is this their actual request, or
no?
Okay, this is just a placeholder.
Yeah, I want to make that clear. That's a placeholder. That is not the school's request.
Okay, and I do see that it already has the additional $300,000 because we reduced the school's budget by $300,000 due to the CARES Act funding, and so that's why I was wondering. I was like, are they just asking for?
Yeah, I meant to say that. I should have said that. That is not the school's request, and you will receive their request at your March 31st work session.
Tracking. Thank you.
Mr. Stonehill? Ms. Bender?
One quick question. Travis, I had asked this on our last work session. Did you find out what the number was for the Board of Supervisors that I asked you about? Where the previous county administrator adjustment?
Yes, he added back money for, I think it's money for the board to attend the VACO conference, all
Okay.
5 members.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe it's not appropriate for this point, but the question would be, is there a way we can get a definitive on if we actually used the money last year from our revenue stabilization fund? Because I thought that we were going to use it, but we supplanted what we were going to use with actually CARES Act funding, and that we wound up not utilizing the revenue stabilization fund. So is there a definitive we can get on that and what the balance actually is?
Yeah, we will get that for you. I would expect that any funds that were remaining were transferred to the general fund for the fund balance, but we're looking at that for you.
Thank you, sir. And then my last question, on page 4, Fund 401 debt service, does this include the new debt service for the courthouse?
It does.
Thank you.
Citizen committee members? Mr. Chapman, do you have any questions, sir? Very good. Mrs. Huber? Mr. Say? All right, then let's move on.
Okay. Okay, the next on the agenda is a presentation by Human Resources. Our director is here to review the Human Resources line by line items.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, the citizen advisory members, and our staff for the opportunity to present my budget, our request, and also to provide justification. So with that being said, let's jump right in. Starting with line 1100 through 2700. Those are listed for full-time and part-time salaries and benefits to include health insurance, life insurance, FICA, and retirement. And just one note, there is a savings in my budget as far as health insurance for our HR specialist. She's the other full-time member of the staff, and she has waived the health insurance coverage. So that could be much higher if she elected coverage. All right, moving on to line item 2600. That is unemployment insurance claims. In this budget, I requested an additional $2,500 for an increase to $10,000. This is due to the pandemic. Our 2020 total for unemployment claims was $14,472.36. I only have $4,500 approved for that line item for 2020. Please note that we only paid half of our bill for quarters 2, 3, and 4, and the state used CARES funding to pay for the remaining half. For line item 2820, tuition assistance, no change in that request. We had $3,000 listed last year, and that was taken out due to COVID. So I just requested that is put back in. Tuition assistance is a fund that is available to our employees who seek higher education as long as their class is relative to their responsibilities and their duties. It has to be pre-approved prior to their enrollment, and they pay the money up front, and then they get the reimbursement from us if the funds are available. All right, moving on to line item 3600, advertising. We have $1,500 in the budget for that. That's a low amount. Currently, 95% of our advertisement is done through our online applicant tracking and also through Indeed.com. There's no cost for the ads that are placed in these 2 places. However, when we have a position that's hard to fill, or if we have an executive level position, we may need to advertise in local papers or on professional association websites. And that comes with a cost. For example, just an average ad in the Freelance Star for one day, a 2x3 ad is about $700. All right. Line item 3840, the state police, that is who we use for our background checks, the criminal background checks. With the exception of the sheriff's office and fire rescue, human resources pays for all other departments' background checks. They come at a cost of $27 per background check, and I've added $185 to bring up that number to $740. We have seen an increase in background checks recently, and so I just wanted to make sure that was covered. Line 5210, Postal Services, is pretty self-explanatory. We use it for mailings that we send to our vendors, VRS for example, or for any kind of employee correspondence, and that request has not changed from the previous year. Line item 5240, cell phones. There is an increase there. We have added one additional cell phone to the HR department, and that is shared by our other two staff members. So that comes at a cost of $600 additional, bringing that to $1,560. The next line item, 5540, for travel and conferences. Last year, due to COVID, that was cut, and no travel was allowed for conferences or training. I'm a board member for the International Public Management Association, or IPMA HR, the Virginia chapter, and we currently host 2 conferences per year, one in the spring and one in the fall, and it's expected that all board members attend. We actually have our conference coming up on Monday, which is a virtual conference, but we are looking to the fall to hopefully hold that in person. In addition to that, I need continuing education credits to maintain my professional in HR certification as well as my SHRM CP certification. And this money would allow us to attend trainings, also not just myself, but the records manager and our HR specialist. Previously, that was denoted at $4,200, and I have reduced that to $4,000 for this year. All right, line item 5541. Organizational development. This is a fund that is used to provide training to employees or managers, and I've reduced that down from $1,500 to $1,000 this year. Line item 5810, dues and membership. This is for professional memberships for our HR staff to include SHRM as well as IPMA. Previously, it was $980, and I have reduced that to $841 this year. If we join as a group through IPMA, there was a reduction of $139. Line item 5897, employee wellness. These funds are used to promote healthy living. In the past, we've had walking groups, we've had yoga and meditation held here. We've had wellness lunch and learns, and so I've put in $300. That's no change in that request. Line item 6001 for office supplies. There was a huge reduction in that number. I reduced it to $800, a reduction of $700. I'm sorry, the request is $800, and that is a reduction of $700. It was previously $1,500. This covers things like cartridges for our printers. We have 2 printers in HR, any kind of office supplies, tablets, pens, things like that. But just looking at the history, $1,500 was far too much, so we reduced that cost down. Line item 6002 for food supplies and service. We do supply food for lunch and learns. Often we will have support seminars here, and a lot of times to get people here, we have to offer food. So to do that, I've taken that down $825 and left $375 in the budget for that. And this would also cover other times when we provide food. We've had, again, like I said, some of the programs for wellness and such, we provide some snacks or things like that. Line item 6011 for uniforms and wearing apparel. There's no change in that. $300 is requested That is $100 per staff member to buy. We don't have uniforms, but to buy shirts that have the King George logo on them. Looks very nice when you go to a meeting or seminar or conference and you're representing the county. And also on Fridays, we have dress down day. We can wear those shirts at that time as well. All right. Line item 6013, educational and recreational supplies. I've taken that down $100. That covers professional books that may be required for trainings or for education of our staff. Line item 6014 for other operating supplies. And that number is, currently I've listed $2,000. That is down $1,700. It was $3,700 in the budget previously. But this does cover things like prizes and gifts. So normally we have 2 events per year. We have the annual picnic in the summertime, and then we have the holiday luncheon for the employees. These are ways that the board recognizes the employees and just gives them thanks for their dedication and hard work. We normally give out some type of gift that has a King George swag on it. And then we have drawings for different prizes. In addition to that, we have the Making a Difference Awards, which one is awarded to the community, and then one to, actually 2 to employees. So we purchased the awards for that, as well as the service awards that we pass out at the holiday luncheon as well. This also includes certificates and jackets for those. So again, I've taken that down $1,700 to $2,000. Line item 6040 for furniture and equipment. Currently, I'm asking for 2 chairs for our HR staff and 1 desk for myself. All that furniture that we have in both offices are hand-me-down furniture. Nothing wrong with that, but after some time, you can notice the wear and tear. My desk has cracks and tape on it to kind of hold it together. So I am asking for $375 to cover 2 chairs and 2 desks. All right, here's the biggie. Line item 8207 for computer hardware and software. Currently listed in the budget is $77,799. So I wanted to provide some more information about that. What I've looked at is a program, actually several programs offered through NeoGov that will help to increase our efficiency in our department. What they have proposed is a 3-year special. If we choose to purchase any of their software, for the first year, we would only have to pay the cost for training and implementation. So if we chose to go with 5 different products, 5 programs, the first year we would only spend $19,500. The second year, we would pay half cost of the subscription, which would be $29,150. And the third year is when you would actually pay the full subscription for all the systems that you purchase at a cost of $58,299. Now, I know that's daunting and that's a big number. I do have an option. So as a priority, instead of purchasing 5 different software programs, which we would love to have all of them, we do have an applicant tracking currently in place, and we have onboarding currently in place through Civic Plus. The reason why I included NeoGov's programs is because they offer something that is miles apart from Civic Plus. We have reporting that really doesn't report. We try to pull up certain reports and we still have to do them manually. However, with that being said, we can live with that. The priority would be to purchase at least 2 of these programs. One is Learn, and that is a learning management system that could be beneficial to all employees. One of my goals, and one thing I had mentioned previously, my goal is to have King George University. And this would be a learning plan that we could develop career paths. We could implement training for new hires, for new managers. Last year, I even took a poll. I went to all the departments, sat down with them to talk about their needs, their employees, what their goals are. So we can develop different plans through this system and we can assign it to the employees. It will produce a transcript for them so they can see exactly what they've completed. It will give them timeframes to complete it. If we have required training, like we do the harassment training, it would give them a time frame and reminders to complete that training. So I feel like that is an essential program that would really help us to grow and develop as a community. Now they have over 400 courses that we can pick from. And again, we can kind of develop our own plans, but it gives us a good start. The second program that I highly recommend would be the HRIS system through NeoGov. Now, this would allow us to focus on some of the higher value projects. It would be a central hub for our employee records, for benefit administration, for salaries and workforce data. It would offer a self-service to our employees where they could view their pay stubs. And currently they can do that online, but this would kind of put things into one place. They could update their contact information. So if we have somebody that moves, they have to contact us. We have to go in the system and update it. We have to make sure that payroll has it as well as accounts payable. They could update their contact, change their tax elections, even request time off instead of doing the paper leave sheet, and their supervisor could approve it. It would increase our efficiency and allow us to provide additional data that we currently do manually. If we chose to go with those two programs, the cost of implementation and training for those two programs would be $7,500. All right, I'm near the end here. So I have requested under additional staff, I am requesting one additional full-time HR specialist. We currently have one part-time HR generalist, and she serves as well as our records manager. So we want to retain her. We also have one full-time HR specialist, and we have myself, the HR director. We service 473 employees, and we service them from the time they start to look at ads online to the time that they come here and the time that they actually leave. It is recommended that for every 100 employees that are serviced, there is one full-time HR person, and we currently only have 2. In addition to that, I would like to reclassify my current HR specialist to an HR manager. This would move her salary from a grade 211 at $41,050 to a grade 217 with the minimum starting salary of $56,544. This will create a hierarchy within the HR department, and it will also provide an opportunity for growth. So you have the generalist, the specialist, the manager, and then the director. Now, having said that, I recognize that this budget year is going to be lean. I've already heard some of the discussions, and I also recognize that there are other departments who are requesting additional positions. So I would also like to offer an option of hiring a part-time staff member if I cannot get the full-time approved, but hiring a part-time staff member, which would save on salary and also eliminate the cost of benefits. In addition to that, an increase in salary for our HR specialist if she cannot be moved to the position of HR manager. And instead of the reclassification, moving her from $41,000 to $49,000. If after 1 year there's still a need with a part-time employee, then I could come back at that time and request a conversion from a part-time to full-time for our next budget cycle. That is all I have, and I'm here for any questions that you all may have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Granger.
Yes, Ms. Sumil, thank you for coming out.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to assume the department requests here are for the new full-time HR specialist and the conversion of the HR specialist to an HR manager.
Yes.
What would be the delta in the request if we were to go with your compromise direction, just out of curiosity?
Sorry, I actually was going to make a recommendation when it's my turn to speak, but
Yeah.
could you provide us with a memo, a detailed memo with particularly the staffing, one about the staffing
Yes.
proposals, the one option versus the other option?
Sure.
And I think that would help. So,
That answer
because that's a
all,
lot
yeah.
to take in tonight.
Yes.
Between that, a memo regarding that, and a separate memo regarding the software
Okay.
needs, justification, because I think, maybe I'm speaking for everyone and I shouldn't, but I think we'd like to see a little bit more than just, what you just pitched to us, which was great. Thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, if we could get some more. And then go ahead, Mr. Granger.
No,
Sorry.
it's fine. I'm a little confused on the dollar request for the computer hardware software, because it shows there $77,799. Then you spoke to, if you went with 5 software applications, it'd be 19,500.
So,
And so
that's the 3-year option. So again, that's just, the first year would be only implementation and training.
So
And so the 77,000 would be the total cost. We're looking over the course of 3 years.
okay,
So I want you to be aware of that and not say, well, oh, I thought it was only 19,000. It is. And then when you get to that 3rd year, there's an annual cost that continues.
understood. So in the first year, then it would not. Let's just pretend we would go with all 5.
Okay.
Just for the simplest, because I believe the 77. I'm sorry, it's the 77,799 with 5 applications.
Yes.
Okay, so, but for the first year, it'd only be 19,500,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'd be more the next year. I don't remember I apologize.
Yeah, the
and
second
then-
year is half of the subscription.
Okay,
cost.
and then it's the full subscription cost, and then every year after that, it's the full subscription cost if
Yes.
you want to continue to have the service,
Yes, sir.
software as a service.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so would you be then requesting for the full 77,799 to be in your budget, and then you would just pull that money out and follow on fiscal years, or I'm a little confused by the request, I guess. Should it really be 19,500?
And that's what, I'll let Dom speak. I think she will.
Yeah, so when she put it together, she put the cost of everything.
Okay,
And so that's why she put it in there. But when we asked her to come tonight, we wanted her to explain to you all that it's not the whole amount the first year,
okay.
but that it does have to be maintained. So it's not like something you say, oh,
We can bail out after 1 year. We're stuck for 3 years.
Yeah.
After 3 years, if we want to move on, we don't have to stick with it anymore, but at least 3 years worth.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes. sir.
thank you.
No problem.
Tracking. That's it. I'm good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
So you brought up 2 applications in particular.
Mhm.
What would be, let's go down the rabbit hole of if the board were to entertain you on that and say, all right, let's do those 2 that you think are the most valuable, the long pole in the tents. What would be the 3-year cost on those 2? Just those 2?
Just a second. So I know initially it would be $7,500. I emailed the representative before I came down. It's $3,750 for each for implementation and training for the first year.
Okay.
I do need to get the cost.
So
of it.
Is it linear? Like, would it be like 3/5 or 2/5 of 77,799?
About that, I believe one program was 15,000, the other was 12. So the
Okay, so it's
second
not like
year-
one of them is more expensive. They're all the same.
Relative,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That I can figure it out from there. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Stonehill?
You answered the questions about the computer programs as well. I was not following that along, but if you do get what Mrs. Kupka asked for, that would help. But we could sit down there and kind of read it ourselves.
Okay.
Along, that was my other question, was the part-time person. So if you could get those to us. And I did jump back to the where was I? Tuition help, that's open to everybody here, all county employees, correct?
All county employees, yes, sir. So
Right.
that's a small amount for, everybody. But what we found is that it was $2,000 and $2,500 and $3,000. So we only have a small number of people who've actually even inquired about it. But we want to make it available. We try to promote it, especially in our new hires in onboarding, because we'd like to see that number go up. We'd like to see more people utilize it.
Didn't we have something in one of our employee things that money that was raised there went towards that? Or went towards some type of, just thinking where we did the colored metal, something that they did, and that money that was raised went to some educational fund. I thought it was going back to this.
I don't recall that, not for the tuition assistance.
Right.
And it went back to the county?
I thought, I'll get with you later and see if I can remember it, but
Okay.
that's, with that information that you provide us later, that'll answer my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bender?
Thank you for this. Very well done. One question I would really like to see a breakdown. The KG University is a really cool idea, but I just would like to know what exact courses or where we can go to look up more information.
Okay.
And I understand the structure, and it is important to have, so you know where you can rise up to get to the ultimate level, maybe someday be you. So I appreciate this, and I'll probably, after I digest this more, I'll have more questions, but I just wanted to make sure we get the information on the classes. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can appreciate the professional development and those types of costs to maintain your credentials, and the conferences make sense to me. But looking at like general supplies and expenditures, office supplies, everybody tends to work administration-wise upstairs. I don't know why we get department by department breakdown of office supplies. There should be like a supply locker where it's centralized, we buy in bulk and we store it there, and when you need something, you go. Someone could take an inventory and you restock as needed. So I'd like to get away from at least where departments are centralized, like upstairs. There should be a supply locker instead of individual departments requesting funding. And then the computer software, anytime you can demonstrate efficiencies, it always sounds great. However, if we had the money, I would say absolutely this makes sense. It's more efficient. It's great. The truth is we don't. So looking at this all together, I wouldn't be in a position where I could support a 3-year contract for this, even if it was just one, and yes, it would make things more efficient. Some programs, like you said, employees can go and change their tax forms. But I would think that if we were going to increase the budget and we had to increase taxes to be able to match that, I would think that the employees would be more apt to say, well, instead of me being able to change my taxes on a computer program that we had to pay for, I'd rather get a pay raise instead. So, all that translates. So it sounds good. Efficiency is great, but I don't see where that would be a game changer to the county under current circumstances. So basically, it wouldn't rate as a priority. Now, you did make staffing requests, and I understand the county's growing, and as staff is growing to accommodate that growth, there's going to be needs. Again, cost is a concern. So I would be in a position where personally I could support the addition of a part-time employee because, like you stated earlier, the benefits and those exorbitant costs that are on top of a salary come off because they are part-time. So I would be in a position where I could support that. But thank you very much for your very thorough presentation. And I'm sorry I couldn't be more supportive, but that's how I'm looking at this.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Citizens, Mr. Chapman? Thank you, sir. Mrs. Huber, go right ahead.
I just want to, if you could clarify between the software, and that you may cover this in the memo that Ms. Kupka asked for, but the software versus the 2 programs that you set as a compromise, do they do the same things, or are they totally separate systems?
Well, the 2 that I recommended, if I had to scale it back, were included in the 5. The 5 included the Learn, which is the learning management system. It included a performance evaluation system, which currently we still do paper evals, recruitment, onboarding, and then the HRIS.
Okay,
So the 2 that I prioritized was the HRIS and the learning management system.
got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Say.
Yeah, my first question probably is a more generic question. For all these we're looking at when we're talking about payroll salaries, does that include an assumed set raise, cost of living adjustment for next year? Or does this assuming same salary as last year?
It's the same, right, Ms. Hahn? It is the same. That only happens if the board elects to do so, and then it gets factored in.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mrs. Hahn.
And that's one of the things that we talked about last week. We presented scenarios of doing a 3%, a 2%, 3%, 4%. And Mr. Kuzenberry also spoke to the liking to get back to merit increases rather than COLA across the board. And so I think that's going to be covered in later discussion.
Yeah, I just didn't know where any of that was already factored in, so it's not factored in. Okay. Next question. So on the software, so I did see the line says hardware/software. Is hardware required to run these applications, or do we already have existing hardware that we would be hosting these applications on?
Yes, it would be on the existing software, hardware that we have currently. We wouldn't have to purchase anything to run these programs.
Okay. You stated by doing this that we get efficiencies. If the decision is made not to fund this, does this drive any other changes above? Were you assuming any efficiencies when you factor in your above numbers, where if we don't buy these applications, we're going to have additional increases somewhere else?
No, I mean, it just means that we would just put a little bit more effort in there. And we, again, our department just strives to definitely meet expectations, try to exceed those. It's just becoming more and more difficult as we add more people. But we get it done. So we would do whatever we have to do to keep it at that level.
Okay, and last question. So if we made the decision to purchase the 2 or all 5 this year, it sounds like it's a contract, so the county would be committed at least the next 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sir. Yep.
Thank you. So I had a couple of comments and questions.
Okay.
For unemployment insurance claims, can you tell me, you said it was last year $14,472.36. How many employees was that? About?
Over those 3 big quarters, I would say it was roughly 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Tuition assistance, that's first come, first served, right?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
so once it's gone for the year, if you didn't get it in first, once it's gone, it's gone.
Yes.
Okay.
And tied to that too is you have to stay with us a certain period of time. And if you don't, then you have to pay the money back.
Gotcha. I feel like 2 years ago, we participated in a NACO program that was professional development for employees. And I actually believe Ms. Cobb was one of the graduates. Is there any money anywhere in here or in the administration budget to resume participation in that if the board chooses to do so?
I didn't have that in my budget. I think that was paid through administration. I think actually NACO funded one person,
right,
and then we paid the other. And I think that came out of the administration budget, but I'm not sure. I can double check on that.
Yeah, if you and Mr. Kuzenberry can just double check that for next time. That not anything urgent. I just was curious to see it, and maybe Ms. Cobb can tell us offline if she felt that was a worthwhile thing to continue.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I actually took that class last year, and they had sent an email to me. I had forwarded on to Dr. Young about they could give us a discount, not as much as the first one, but I could get that information for you. And it was very worthwhile taking that class. And I know those that took it before, it was very worthwhile. So if you'd like that information, I could get it for you.
Okay.
Yeah, please do. All right. So in relation to Mr. Bush's comments about office supplies, I'd be interested to see, Mr. Kuzenberry, if we could take a look at what the administration budget is for office supplies, because I know from working upstairs that there is a cabinet up there and there are some shared supplies, but I would imagine, Ms. Sumail, you probably have some maybe unique sets of folders that you need for personnel files or certain post-it flags for sign here for applicants or whatever. So yeah, if we could just take a look at where those supplies overlap and see if there are any efficiencies we could gain there that might help address some of Mr. Bush's concerns about that. I like that you're continuing the employee wellness initiatives. I was one of your walkers when I was here and also participated in some of your lunch and learns. And yes, if you feed them, they will come. So in your, I know I asked for 2 memos, one regarding the staffing and one regarding the software. If you can address, because my concern is some of the things that you touched on with the software create efficiencies for things that your staff is doing manually or by hand. And so then if you do that, does that not result in less hands-on time, i.e. work for your staff? So then how do we justify adding a new position?
Okay.
So if you can then somehow provide a justification, I guess is what I'm looking for. Do you understand my concern here? Because you're telling me that if we get you this software, it's going to create efficiencies and employees all over the county are going to be able to input things themselves at their desktop or on their phone, but then might that not mean that your physical bodies upstairs wouldn't have as much labor to do? So that's where I'm coming from.
I got you.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, so I'm asking that because I don't want to put anyone out of a job.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because some of what you're saying could put someone out of a job or just mean that you maybe don't need another whatever. So that's where I'm coming from. And then the other comment I had was, I do appreciate no matter which direction we go with the discussion about the director, manager, specialist, generalist. I like that you're thinking of a succession plan too. So that's always important to maintain the continuity of the organization.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All righty.
I have one thing that I'd like to leave with you. I forgot to pass this out, but this kind of demonstrates all the responsibilities that we have. So believe me when I tell you that even if we get this software, there's plenty to do. But I like for you to have this, and I'll work on the memos as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming out to present your budget tonight. We appreciate it. All right then, Mr. Cusenberry, are we ready to move on to treasurer?
We are. Mr. Jones, the treasurer, is here to discuss his budget and provide a line-by-line breakdown.
Very good. Welcome, Mr. Jones.
I certainly tried to keep my budget requests as lean as possible. So I'll go through it line by line, and I'll highlight 3 changes from last year. Line 1100 through 2700 would be my staff salaries, as well as the fringes associated with those staff members. You'll see I have 3 staff full-time, and I employ 2 part-time staff members during June and December. So you'll see those numbers there. Professional services, line 3160. That's the first change. You will see a decrease in $1,000 in that line. It's now the request is 1622. We used to use a VEC database just in some of our delinquent collection. We no longer use it, or we probably only use it 3 or 4 times a year. It just wasn't worth the $1,000, we could figure out another way around using that. Line 3310, repair and maintenance. This again is another change. The request is $175. This is a decrease from FY20. There used to be a typewriter in the office that we were paying to get service from time to time. Of course, no one uses a typewriter anymore, so we no longer require to have it serviced. Line 3500, printing and binding. Self-explanatory there, that's for printing of the bills. That number didn't change, 11,500. Next is advertising. I'm required by law to advertise in a local publication. So I'm only required to advertise once, but I do it twice just to make sure the word gets out. $824 is the cost. We advertise in the Freelance Star. Line 5210, postal services. That is the postage that's required to mail the tax bills, delinquent notices. Yes, that's it. Line 5230, that's telecommunications. That's my office's share of the Verizon cost here. That is $3,120. Line 5410, again, is another shared cost. We have to pay to lease the postage machine as well as a copier, and that's our shared cost, $3,188. Line 5805, DMV stop fee. As part of our delinquent collections, we do have DMV stops that are placed where customers, if they do not pay their personal property, they cannot renew anything at DMV. So that is a cost to the county. It is a $20 cost per removal. Now, having said that, that line right there is $16,000. We do pass that cost along to the customer. So while it's in the budget, it is covered. Dues and memberships. We have 3 memberships that we belong to, Vallejo, the BAI Users Group, as well as the Treasurers Association. All very worthwhile, all very worthy. We learn a lot from all of those memberships. That's $985. And finally, my only increase this year is office supplies. With the decrease in traffic in my office has come an increase in phone calls. So my staff has made it aware that sometimes it can become a bit cumbersome to hold the phone on their neck while they're trying to type and find things such as that. So they requested some headsets, at which we've already purchased one this year. The one employee who has it likes it. So the other 2 employees would like to have it. So the one increase is the original office supply budget was $3,000. Price the 2 headsets, that would be an additional $600. And that's all I have. Questions?
Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. So thank you for coming out. I appreciate you and for presenting your budget. I guess, it sounds like it's a net down for the request. But last year's, I guess my question is based on what was adopted at least. Because last year's adopted was 370, and so this year's request is 389, which is about $20,000. I don't know off the top of my head what was pulled off from last year that is back on here this year.
That increase is in salaries. I've had a little bit of a turnover in my office.
Okay.
So with the addition of salaries as well as healthcare, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it's all in the salaries then?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's it.
Mr. Stonehill?
Thanks for coming out, Randy, but I don't have any questions at this time.
All right then, Ms. Bender.
I don't have any questions, but thank you again.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman? Mrs. Huber? Mr. Say?
Just a couple. So one was probably a follow-on to my earlier question about salaries. So as far as benefits, I know we said that any salary increases weren't built in here. Are any planned costs for increase in benefits next year, are they already built into these numbers?
Ms. Hahn, can you answer that, please?
Yes, the benefits, like VRS, that goes up every 2 years, so we remain constant for the next fiscal year. That increase was seen in the current year budget. And then we actually, in the healthcare, we are being granted a 4% decrease, and that number has already been built into the salary piece up there, the lower amount.
Okay, thank you. And one other question, I think it was just confusion on my part. You mentioned on the DMV stop fees, you said that the cost is in there, but it's passed on to the customers. So if it's passed on to the customers, is it actually in the 389? I guess I'm trying to figure if the customer's paying and it's here, is it being paid twice? Or did I just misunderstand what you said?
We physically have we're invoiced by DMV. So it's actually a line that we have to pay. I just noted that it's covered. It's not a line that's covered by the county per se. It's a line that's passed along to customers.
Okay. So basically it gets collected as revenue because the $20 gets charged to the customer, right? So Mr. Jones's office collects it as revenue, but then they have to document it, detail it as an expenditure on that line item because then they have to pay it to DMV.
Okay.
So it basically is a wash, but it has to be accounted for on each, both on the revenue and the expenditure side.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense.
Sure. Assuming they pay it.
Well, the stop's not going to be released.
It doesn't get released unless they pay it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And we're not charged until we release it. So.
Thank you. I don't think I had any questions. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. All right then, moving on to Board of Supervisors.
Yes, Madam Chair, you asked us to bring this back to you to discuss your travel and conference request. We provided you the entire copy of the entire Board of Supervisors budget, just so you and the committee would have that. So we're looking forward to hearing from the board members regarding their request.
So I noted that the prior interim, I think, had reinstated the travel that we had written off during COVID. And that's for the current fiscal year, right? I don't know about my colleagues, if anyone has any big travel plans between now and July 1st is when we would have to spend that, right? So go ahead, Ms. On.
He put it back in for next year.
For next year.
And
okay.
What he did was in the current year budget, when the budget was created,
he took what we had.
You all had your expenses out by each individual board member. And then when COVID hit and that was all taken out, instead of putting back in the pieces and parts, he just put in a lump sum of the 18,000, I believe it was.
Gotcha. So I'll go down the line if my colleagues had their travel plan prepared and had a number.
I have a number. I apologize. I know we were supposed to send it to Travis. I am sorry. I failed to do that, and that's my fault. I'm sorry. But I'll be honest, for me, it really just be the VACO conference, which based off not last year, but the previous year, I estimated to be about $1,370, which was for about $1,200 for the registration and the hotel lodgings, and then about $170 for mileage and round trip estimates for some of those things like mileage, and then I have something else. I apologize. I should have written down better. But it was 1370 is what I had.
All right, Mr. Stonehill.
I also forgot until earlier today. I apologize for that. The VACO was already added in there, correct? If they have it?
That would be considered part of what was added back in. Yes, I think there were funds to cover, because I think all of us said last year that we wanted to attend the VACO conference.
I believe so, and we could kind of look back at last year's before the cut was made and see what the total amounts were for each one of you all. But I'm sure that was in last year's line items, and the total was a cut, and the previous interim just put it in as a whole, not by individual board members.
All right, well, I had only just put in just a couple of registration fees at $450 plus the VACO, depending on, what we have there. So I really don't have too many travel plans.
Ms. Bender?
I also have to come. I did not send in mine either. I apologize for that, but I would just put 1,500 for the VACO in any of those. I serve on 2 committees, so it'd be good to attend them if it's in person. Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I intentionally didn't send Travis anything because I am not seeking reelection, and I will not be traveling to anything I need to do in execution of the remainder of my term. I will incur that cost. However, I would like to point out, per our travel policy, which we developed, we do have to go through this formal process of identifying where we're going to travel, the purpose of the travel, and to predetermine or pre-estimate any registration or conference fees so that could be included in the budget. And that's per our travel policy, because in the past there's been some criticism of travel policy or travel execution by the Board of Supervisors. So we enacted that policy, and it seems to have worked its purpose. So thank you very much.
So I did not email this, but I do have it prepared. I know the prior year, I believe my request was around $4,000, and I did make some cuts. And I can send this to you if it helps my colleagues, because I did some research based on what the conference fees were in 2019 from VACO when people were still traveling and having conferences in person. So, I know what the registration was for VACO annual conference was $300. The hotel, based on what the Norfolk, Maine rate right now is for 3 nights, if you do 3 nights, is like $825. The mileage, I got the meals and incidentals rate and the mileage rate from the procurement specialist. And then I have on there registration for Virginia Local Government Day in Richmond is always a good day in February to go down and meet with our delegate and our state senators. And that was $115 the last time I think Mr. Stonehill and I went last year, right before everything got shut down. And then we had also registered for the VACO County Supervisors Forum in Richmond, held annually in March, and that registration was $250. There was 1 hotel night around $150, and then meals and incidentals. And then I just had other regional training to be determined. Usually VACO does a regional meeting, and I think we're VACO Region 7. So that would just be whatever the registration fee is for that. And so that's kind of up in the air because that's usually in spring or summer. So maybe they'll just do it virtually still. And then the VACO County Officials Summit is tentatively scheduled for August 18th and 19th, and that registration fee is $50. So my grand total is about $2,000 less than it was last year. I'm putting in for $2,176.79. And so I can send this to you, Mr. Kusenberry, and then if you want to send it to my colleagues so they can get firmer numbers. So we are following the policy like Mr. Bush suggested. Go ahead, Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have one alibi. So traditionally, since we've started this travel policy, the board had come to the conclusion that we as a board would select who our NACO representative would be, and that we would send one member of the board to the NACO conference. And I think we had agreed that it would be the acting chair of that year. So that's just something to throw out there for consideration, to send one person to the NACO conference. And then also, being I'm not seeking reelection, whoever takes this seat is going to be a new supervisor. So I would like to account for new supervisor training, because that's going to happen that budget cycle for whoever my successor is, for them to be able to receive that new supervisor training.
That's a good suggestion. So I can also pull, we can pull my expenses. Mr. Stonehill and I both attended the Chairman's Institute last year, and so typically we send the new electees, the new members of the board, to the Chairman, Vice Chairman's Institute and the Supervisor Forum. So we can look at historical records and figure out for whoever new comes on in Mr. Bush's place. And then is there any preference of the board to address the question of the NACO-VACO representative? Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just settle it like we did when we did our travel policy last time. So I would like to nominate the chair to be the NACO representative to attend the NACO conference and come back and brief the board on the NACO conference.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. I will accept your nomination. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you. So I will amend my budget accordingly. If that NACO annual conference does happen in July, I think it normally is, I'll run some numbers for that and have submit an amended request. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I did not get to attend that last year as a representative because of COVID, but it was in Orlando, and I had it in my travel budget, so I'm sure they could look it up and find that number. But I do appreciate you submitting that to us to help your travel budget, to help us get ours. Thank you.
Sure thing. All right. Would you like to continue the discussion about the remainder of the Board of Supervisors budget, sir?
Be glad to. The Board of Supervisors budget includes their compensation. Each board member gets $15,000 per year. Also, there's the other charges, FICA and other charges associated with that. VRS insurance is part of that charge. There's a little bit of money for workman's comp insurance, some printing and binding costs, advertising costs. That's all the public hearings and things and Board of Supervisors meetings that have to be advertised. Cell phones, each board member has a cell phone. That's those charges. The public officials liability insurance, we're required to have that to protect the county and the board members. Dues and memberships, that's things like, I assume that's things like NACO and VACO and things like that. Those things that the board members belong to. And then office supplies, $1,000 for that.
So I was remiss when we concluded the travel spend plan discussion. I did not ask our citizens if they had questions about that. So let me circle back momentarily. Sir, Mr. Chapman, did you have any questions about that, sir? Mrs. Huber? Mr. Say? Very good. All right, then. Then I'll entertain questions from members regarding the remainder of the budget, the Board of Supervisors budget. All right, Mr. Stonehill, Ms. Bender, Mr. Bush.
So this is an election year coming up. and I feel comfortable addressing this because I'm not seeking reelection, so it's not self-serving. But during the election year cycle is when the board can look at a raise. I wouldn't think that we would be entertaining that right now during our situation, but I did want to bring that to the awareness since budgets and salaries are a line item on here. If we want to stay status quo for the next board coming up, or if a raise was wanted to be looked at. But I would have been remiss if that wasn't mentioned.
So I'll poll the board. Mr. Granger, Mr. Stonehill. Mr. Stonehill, Ms. Bender?
No, but I just wanted to clarify for the our citizens and those watching is that until recently, the board only got $5,000 a year, and comparably to all the other localities make a lot more. I think Caroline almost makes $30,000 for their board members. And so just so everybody knows, you get a lot for what you pay. Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm not seeking a raise, a salary increase, for the record. But thank you very much, Mr. Bush, for bringing that up. Yeah. I did have a question. Health insurance premiums, $13,644. So, who is that for?
Yes, that's one member of the board does have health insurance, and that covers dual coverage.
Available to all members.
Is it? I was not aware it was available.
It is available to all members. I'm not going to ask who it is.
Okay, no, I don't need to know. I was not aware that that was a benefit.
Yes, ma'am.
That's good to know. And then yeah, again, I just reiterate, if we could look at the supply closet and the office supplies, that'd be appreciated. Thank you so much. Any other questions about the remainder of the Board of Supervisors budget from citizens? Mr. Chapman? Mrs. Huber? Mr. Say? Very good. All right, let's move on then, Mr. Cusberry.
Okay, the next item, the Director of Community Development is here, and she has some pay actions and position requests, and she has a plan that she would like to discuss with the Board of Supervisors and the committee.
Very good. Thanks for coming out, Ms. Hall.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, and then we'll come back to this one. Thank you. As many of you are aware, the Department of Community Development has gone through many changes since the retirement of our previous director this past fall. Previously, the Director of Community Development was also the building official. With my appointment as Director and Zoning Administrator, we promoted the existing planner to the senior planner and replaced our planner position recently. Our deputy building official has been appointed interim building official until he is fully certified through DHCD. He has 12 months to accomplish this certification by the building code requirement. Due to COVID, he was unable to take these classes and certifications prior to the retirement of our previous building official. He is currently actively sitting for his certifications, and it's expected that he will become fully certified this year with the increase of his current salary of $70,800 to $80,000 plus benefits. Once the deputy building official is promoted, this position will need to be backfilled. Our existing certified combination building inspector would be promoted to a building technical assistant. He will then do less field inspections and more plan review in our office. His current salary is $44,954 with a 10% increase of $48,284. With the increase of office duties, our senior permit technician / office manager has become more of a full-time office manager, especially with the upcoming management of our new permitting software. Current salary of $45,143 with a 5% increase of $47,415. Both of our permit technicians are severely underpaid. Their duties require a great amount of knowledge and detail, and these positions worked in the office throughout the entire COVID shutdown. These positions are imperative to our daily operations. They are both certified permit technicians through DHCD, which is recognized by both state and nationwide. Even with the years of service raises recently received this year, these two positions received an increase of $627 annually. I'm requesting that both positions be brought up to a $36,000 annual yearly salary, with one position being promoted to a senior permit technician at $38,000 a year. At minimum, community development needs an additional permit technician and building inspector. As fast as a permit comes across the counter, it will soon require a building inspection. A planning tech is also being requested. This would be administrative staff to the planning department and would be a newly created position. This position is envisioned as a place a permit technician can move up and train and eventually become a planner. Our office sees a high overturn of our permit technicians. We expect a lot of these positions, and there's little to no room for growth. They often leave to work in other departments. Currently, our previous permit technicians are succeeding in other departments, such as the treasurer's office and finance, because that was their only option for growth. If you could go back to the previous slide, please. As you can see in this spreadsheet, community development stats for our office has increased consistently over the past 5 years. In 2016, we had 725 total permits. In 2020, we had 1,063 total permits. In 2016, we had 108 single-family dwellings. In 2020, we had 170 single-family dwellings. Average inspections have also increased, with 289 per month in 2016 and 404 per month in 2020. You can see that this trend continues on the planning side of our department as well, with the increase in new subdivision plats, site plan reviews, special exceptions, etc. Our revenue in fiscal year of 2016 was a total of $290,296. In fiscal year 2020, the total was $502,261. Part of the revenue increase was the fee schedule, which was increased in 2018. Community development would also like to propose a new fee increase to both the building and zoning fees. A quick look at today's fee schedules in other localities, including Westmoreland, Caroline, Stafford, Spotsylvania, and City of Fredericksburg, King George is the lowest in most aspects. The best we can tell by HR records is that our office has consistently kept approximately 12 positions in our department. Adding these 3 additional positions would allow community development to be more proficient in our daily tasks, cross-train with other positions to create redundancy, and build teams so that when we do have employees leave our department, we are not left without someone who can take on these duties that require certain expertise. Currently, our residential permit turnaround is 7 to 10 business days, faster than most other localities. We would like to increase our level of service on the commercial and large project side as well. We will need additional members of our team to achieve this. Additionally, we currently employ a part-time contract engineer, which is very expensive. In the past, we had discussed with the board a possibility of hiring a full-time engineer that would also be skilled in transportation and utilities. This position would not likely be under my department, but should that position be filled, that line item under professional services for part-time contract engineer would eliminate $187,000 annually. In conclusion, community development is currently requesting a permit technician with a starting salary of $32,000. If promotions are approved, that would be increased to $36,000 as a starting. A building inspector at $42,000 annual salary, and a planning technician at $42,000 annual salary. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Mr. Granger?
Ms. Hall, thank you for coming out.
Pleasure.
You got to that fast. I thank you for quantifying the escalation of services. That really helps me understand the impact and what you guys are providing. So, and thank you for continuing to provide the services with what you had. So I'm gonna ask some questions which you already answered, but I just want to verify because I want to make sure I didn't miss something.
Okay.
You said current on average about 12 people on staff, and you're looking to go to 15
Yes, sir.
to meet the needs. And there were 3 positions. Could you give me the titles for the 3 positions?
One was a building inspector, one was a permit technician, and the other was a planning technician.
And both those technicians were $42K, and the building inspector was 36 or 32 to 36.
The permit technician would be $36,000 if the promotions were approved.
Got it.
And the building inspector and planning tech would start at $42,000 annually plus benefits.
Plus benefits. And so I guess that's my question. I know it's hard to quantify that because if someone doesn't take health insurance, then obviously then you're not paying that. But let's just assume it's a loaded set of benefits. Do you know Ms. Hahn, could you provide that?
I don't know if you can read it in the slide that you have, but there's a column for the salary and then the salary plus benefits.
Yes, ma'am.
And for the existing employees, that's what their benefits are. For the proposed positions, we add the dual rate for the health insurance.
Tracking.
So that, because we don't know if they'll need single or family or dual, so we go middle of the road.
Middle of the road. Okay. That gives me a good idea though, because I see a couple 42s on there, so it gives me a rough idea of where that would be. So what would I see the requests with the increase for the current staff. What would be the request then? I know how to add 36, 42, 42. What would be the request though if it was the whole kit and caboodle?
That's also in the spreadsheet down below.
Plus requested. Is that the 1.187?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an increase of 1.187 on.
That's the total, and then the difference between fiscal year 21 and this requested amount is $301,962.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and helping understand that. I'm tracking now. Like I said, great job on quantifying it. Personally, I think this is somewhere that we definitely need to. I don't know if we'll be able to do all three positions, but you guys have been doing a lot with a little, and you've been doing a lot with a little for a long time. So I know that it's somewhere we definitely need to put in my opinion, a priority on increasing our staffing, service in the community. So thank you.
Mr. Stonehill?
No questions. Just thank you for all that information, and thanks to you and your staff for being there every day during the flu outbreak that we have. But you guys are definitely there and doing a lot of work over there, and certainly appreciate and I have heard a lot of kudos, for your office. So hopefully we can get you some help over there. But no other questions.
Much appreciated.
Ms. Bender?
I just want to thank you for your presentation. I know I've talked to you before about these, and I understand the importance, especially with the volume that has come with COVID and everyone fixing their house or putting in a pool or building on some lot. So I understand and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Heather.
Well,
So $502,261 of revenue. I like your suggestion of revisiting the fee schedule and bringing us up to par. And this is a department that does bring in revenues. This is a department that's directly linked, along with Mr. Minor's department, for economic development, getting things done. The longer things take, people may lose interest. We might lose out on something. This has been years and years of discussion. You are the one department that I absolutely can say, I would like to approve your budget request as presented. That never happens with me, as most of you know, but.
Hold the phone, everybody. Did everybody hear that?
But with this one, especially.
can I hear a second?
Especially with the turnover.
Slow down, we're not there yet.
Especially with the turnover, and especially as technical as those positions are. I don't like the fact that we're losing talent in one department because they feel they have to move to another to get professional development. So you're losing talent, and how much money are we wasting, or hours are we wasting having to retrain somebody else? I think this is very realistic, and this is one of those needs, not the nice to haves. This is a need. I think we've talked about it long enough, especially with community development. So thank you for your presentation. This has my full support.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. If I could also add that even when you hire someone new, it is a long time before they are up to speed. So please keep that in mind.
Mr. Chapman?
Thank you, sir.
Mrs. Huber? Mr. Say?
So a little bit following what Mr. Bush was saying. So as far as the salaries, how do we determine those salaries? Are we looking at other local counties to make sure we're in families, we can try to keep people and don't lose people? How do we determine how to set those salaries?
Well, currently we have building inspectors with the pay band that's set forth within our HR department, as well as our permit technician. The only newly created position would be that planning tech. So while we may be more competitive than our northern neck localities, but salary-wise, we are not competitive to our northern localities, such as Stafford, Spotsylvania. And if you were to go to those localities, they also have double the staff. So those people are proficient in one aspect, whereas most of us wear multiple hats with multiple different duties and jack of all trades here. You're welcome.
So, Ms. Hall, you said the last fee schedule increase was implemented in 2018.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall what part of the year that was? Was that for the whole year or part of the year?
It was implemented on July 1st of 2018.
Okay. Can you give me an idea? Generally, was there a certain percentage for each category for the fee increase, or was it just certain permits increased by a couple bucks? Or
that year we did a complete overhaul. Previous boards were not amenable to a fee increase, so we were many years behind on those fees.
Sure.
So we overhauled every aspect of that. The planning and zoning side, we calculate it by the type of plan, how many lots are created, the area of disturbance, things of that nature. The building side calculates it, 25 cents a square foot.
Based on a square foot?
Yes, ma'am. So for reference, what we noticed today is we're at 25 cents a square foot. Other localities are as much as 35 cents a square foot with a minimum fee tacked on to that. So we are behind again.
Okay, because I note between 2018 and 2019, your revenue delta was an increase of about $70,000.
Yes, ma'am.
So it would seem like implementing that fee schedule increase definitely had a beneficial impact on revenues.
It did. And we also work with Fredericksburg Area Builders Association that gives us a lot of feedback. The community doesn't mind fee increases, but they would prefer small increment fee instead of large jumps. So I would hope in the future that maybe this is something we could do annually instead of several years apart.
Sure. So we can, if we do a fee schedule increase, perhaps have some additional revenue coming in that obviously would not offset all of the staff, the proposal, but it would help with a little bit of it. Maybe cover, maybe one person worth is maybe.
I would say 1 to maybe 2.
Gotcha.
But also keep in mind the contract engineer as well. That's a significant.
Right. Ms. Hahn, did you want to add anything?
Well, we've been working with Heather and worked together to put together the spreadsheet. And I understand she has a lot of big needs, but we also did on the following slides, there are some alternate suggestions, just in case, she prioritized her needs in case of, she can't, you all do not approve everything. But, and I think that might kind of work with a fee schedule increase too. But then she would come back in the next year and request the remainder if she wasn't given everything.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
I'm sorry, it was $187,000 cost for the contracted services? Is that correct?
It is $187,200 annually.
And did you say you felt that could be removed if these positions were funded, or would it take more than that?
that could be removed. When we came to the board a few months ago asking for that contract engineer, it was an immediate need because an employee left.
Okay.
But we also pitched the idea that, we are a growing county. We could use a full-time county engineer that is skilled in more than just stormwater.
Okay.
That transportation's been a topic of conversation, utilities, other areas that we could possibly share with other departments that also need engineering services.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and if I can just add to that, when I was on staff, because I was the grant writer, I did all the smart scale applications and kind of helped with transportation planning. So I can tell you for sure there's a real need. I agree with what Ms. Hall is saying with regard to having some additional staff for that purpose too.
Madam Chair, I
Go ahead,
also
Ms.
jump on
Bennett.
that because as the GWRC chair, which has FAMPO attached to it, we are at a disadvantage as a county because Stafford and Spotsy in the city of Fredericksburg have transportation planners that can help do their smart scale applications. And we are behind the eight ball basically because we don't have that person that has that skill set, which is a very precise skill set. And we are behind us and Caroline, so we might not get as high as rankings on smart scale projects, and that because we don't have one.
Yes, at this time for transportation, we fully rely upon the guidance given to us by VDOT.
All right, so is there a preference of the board to make a decision on this tonight? Or do we want to, go ahead, Mr. Kusenberry.
I think I would request that the board wait until the county administrator present a preliminary budget, but we need to look at everything. So I would prefer if you wait and let me take a shot at things.
Very good, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Hall.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kusenberry.
Thank you. I'm gonna move to the next slide first because that's gonna lead into this slide. These are the next steps for the board. You have work sessions scheduled for March the 24th and March the 31st. I plan to present the board a general fund budget option at your March 31st work session, and I will get you that several days prior to March 31st. I'm gonna try to shoot for that Friday before, but it might be that Monday, but no later than that Monday morning prior to March the 31st. Then I plan to, and of course, March 31st is when the school division is coming to present their budget. So at your April 7th, we want to ask you to have an April 7th work session. I will present a budget option to the board that includes the school division budget. Then the board at their April 14th, requested another work session there to approve a public hearing advertisement at the April 14th work session, and that would be for the operating budget and the tax rates. Then the board would hold a public hearing on April the 20th, and just for the committee's information, once the board has a public hearing on the budget, they have to wait a minimum of 7 days before they can adopt a budget. Okay, so then at your regularly scheduled May the 4th meeting, the board would adopt a operating budget and the tax rates. Well, you would adopt a budget, but you wouldn't appropriate funding and set the tax rates until either your first or second meeting in June. So that's a schedule I'm proposing for the board. So we can go back to the next slide. So at your next work session, which is going to be next Wednesday, we're going to have a presentation by those three oversight agencies. And at the last work session, somebody asked about empowerment. We did check with the sheriff, and he does not support funding empowerment. Is that correct?
For Empower House, it's neither the sheriff nor the Commonwealth.
Nor the Commonwealth's attorney. Okay. Thank you for looking into that.
And also at that work session, we will have the Department of Social Services Director come and discuss his budget and some other items with the board. We also will have Chief Moody and the sheriff come and discuss their position request. And I'm adding another item to that. That's going to be a preliminary revenue compared to preliminary expenditure for the general fund budget. So we'll have a table that compares those, just see where we're standing and take a look at where we are. Then at your March 31st work session, the school superintendent will be presenting the school budget, or it might be the chairman of the school board. We have Heather coming back to present a proposed fee schedule for the board to consider, because we'll want to put that in the budget. And then I will provide a option for the county's general fund budget.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
I had passed around a piece of paper earlier. This was the clarification for GWRC's increase in their budget. So if you guys have any questions, just contact me and I can give you that information. I think it got lost in all our interim administrators. So, so if you have any questions, it's all laid out there. Thank you.
And Mr. Kusenberry has been provided this too, right? Okay. Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Travis, you said that the school board's budget would be presented by the superintendent or the chair?
In the past, it's been, prior to your time, it was presented several times by the superintendent and several times by the board chair.
Okay.
School board chair.
Would it be possible, and obviously pleasure of the board, I would like hopefully to get the presentation from the superintendent for the technical aspects of his budget, especially considering the requests that I've seen in their preliminary. But I would like to invite the school board members, should they want to attend, and maybe invite them to participate. Chair's pleasure, of course, but that's my request.
So I think the thinking on the March 31st was that this was going to be the preliminary school board budget, because we have to have all of our preliminary in by April 1st per statute. And so the idea was for that meeting to have Dr. Benson presented and it not be a joint work session. That will be the initial presentation, and then we will schedule off of that, we will schedule a joint work session with the school board, is the thinking that we had. Yes, Mr. Kusenberry? Yeah, so there is an intention to have a joint work session. It just won't be at that first one.
Okay.
Just given some of the uncertainties right now.
Right.
And knowing that things might change. So probably some point in April, we'll probably look to do a joint work session with the school board for sure.
Yes, and just for the committee's information, the reason I have the May 4th date for adoption of budget is that by law, the Board of Supervisors has to approve a school budget by May 15th.
And then just so we're clear also for our citizen members, we can set it higher and advertise it, and we can't, once we finalize it, we can't go over, but we can always reduce it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Granger?
I don't have questions. I just make sure everyone's available. I know Mr. Kusenberry gave us a couple of extra dates for some more work sessions. So they're fine with me, the 7th and the 14th, and then I guess the 20th would just be during our regular board meeting, would be the public hearing.
Correct.
Yep.
Just verifying with that, everyone's good with this.
Mr. Stonehill? So the assessments are going on right now, so they will not be implemented in the current budget. They would occur if we did anything that would be next year, because there are surveys going out right now. Ms. Binder? Mr. Bush? Citizens? All right, so just if everyone, as Mr. Granger said, just double check your schedules, make sure you're available, and I'm sure we'll get calendar invites for, the new dates laid out in the plan here.
Correct.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Kusenberry?
Nothing else to add, other than I just wanted to point out that on the revenue, in the revenue sheets, we have not added cigarette tax revenue. So that's something we will be discussing in a few weeks.
That's hopefully a bright spot, because I know we've tried to do that for years. All right, then, if there is no other business to come before the board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn to Wednesday, March 24th, 2021 at 6 p.m. here in the Rivercombe Board.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.